Alright, people. Review of the week time. So, lot to talk about, to say the least, in terms of boxing news. We will touch on the news of TKO coming on board of boxing Turkey Yellow Sheet, the fallout from that, what that maybe means for the WBC and the sanctioning bodies. We'll talk briefly on that. We'll have a quick recap of the weekend's action. There was obviously the two shows that were on a Friday as opposed to a Saturday. I don't necessarily mind Friday night boxing. I think that it certainly has a place in the sport. Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou, that was on a Friday. You may remember about a year ago now. In fact, actually, it might even be a year to the day. Actually, I think almost nearly. Jeez, quick year. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. We'll always start whenever there's been fights on, of the fights that happen over the course of the weekend. So let's start with the show that happened in London in the Royal Albert Hall. Now, I did a video on this, not on my channel, for the Ring Magazine. If you go on X, you go on their Instagram and all that, you'll see it there. Personally, I thought it was actually quite good. I enjoyed doing it. It's about a 5-minute long video, and I basically previewed the main event, pretty much the main cards. I think it was the main fight card I pretty much previewed. It didn't really cover Chloe Watson or Frances Hennessy. It was mainly the fights that were happening on the undercard of Lauren Price versus Natasha Jonas. So, to recap it quickly, me and Anna talked about this, and I didn't pick Natasha Jonas to win this fight. It was a bit more one-sided than I thought it would be. I thought it would be a little bit more competitive than that. Lauren Price, very, very talented young fighter. Natasha Jonas is a very likeable fighter, and I made no secret of the fact that as much as I wanted her to win, I didn't think she would win. There's no point picking someone because you want them to win. You have to pick with your head, really, not with your heart, and say, I don't think she was going to win it. And she didn't. Lauren Price wins. Caroline Dubois had a very entertaining tussle with her opponent, Bomi Risin. I think is how I knew I was going to butcher it, and I probably am butchering it, but that was that. I didn't really see any of the Karis Artenstall Raven Chapman fight. I just seen Artenstall dropping Raven Chapman, who I don't think has ever been down in her career. Artenstall not noted as a puncher. She only has one stoppage win, but you don't tend to see a lot of knockouts in women's boxing anyway. And I didn't see Frances Hennessy or Chloe Watson. Chloe Watson actually lost. Yasmin Zaponetska. That name rings a bell. She beat Shannon Ryan. Oh no, she lost to Shannon Ryan. She beat that Maisie Courtney. She's awful. She is absolutely garbage. I don't know how she got that deal with Eddie Hearn. She is garbage. But as she is, by women boxing, I mean, she is really bad. Really bad. So that was the result. I didn't see that fight, just the name rang a bell. I knew I recognised that name from somewhere. So that was the card that happened in London. Obviously down south, boxing, me and I talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on air or if we did it kind of after we finished wrapping up. We talked about boxing in terms of locations in the UK. And now, kind of since the emergence of Harlem Eubank and CBS, we've really started to see, it's not much, but little steps into boxing kind of down the south side of the UK. Because you think about it like this, boxing certainly in England, it's mainly London, it's mainly Manchester, some in Newcastle, Bolton, kind of the Lancashire area, a lot of it around there. From London to Birmingham to kind of Nottingham, Leeds, Sheffield, all that part of England. You never really see cards south of London. You never really see it go way down that part of the UK. And that's arguably the nicest part. In my opinion, it's the most beautiful part of the UK. I much prefer the south to the north. North of England is good, don't get me wrong. But I love the south coast. I absolutely love the south coast of England. I really do. And in Brighton, we had Harlem Eubank versus Tyrone Mckenna. Now, I have to say, I didn't see many of the fights on the undercard. I do know that Matty Harris was back in action. He's still rebuilding after that loss to Doboshenko, I believe it was. I think Doboshenko stopped him, yeah. That's the guy Moses Atelma beat handily. I think Moses Atelma hurt his hand in that fight as well. So, yeah, and that was only his second or third pro fight. So he did beat him handily, really did. So Matty Harris was back in action. We also saw Michael Conlon make his return to the ring. Now, I haven't actually seen the fight. They are trying to build towards a fight with Josh Warrington, as far as I was aware. But apparently he's going to fight for the European title sometime in the summer. In fact, I think that fight's already been signed and sealed. Conlon, listen, I think Conlon's made mistakes in his career. I always thought he would struggle a bit as a pro. He started his pro career based in the States with Manny Robles. And then he moved to Adam Boot, spent several years with Adam Boot. And I always felt that was a mistake because Conlon is athletic to an extent, but he's not a Josh Kelly in terms of athleticism. You know, that has never been Michael Conlon. Adam Boot really, he's not a terrible trainer by no stretch. He's very good with fighter psychology. I think he has a background in that as well. But when you look at Adam Boot, he has a very much a... If you're a fighter with good athleticism, long reach, punching power, and good speed, you're probably going to do well. He needs that kind of David Haye, Roy Jones Jr. type of style. You know, that kind of... David Haye was not Roy Jones, like, in terms of that athleticism, but he had the punching power, the arm lengths. He was able to pull that style off, as was George Groves to an extent. But they had long reach and punching power. Neither Josh Kelly nor Michael Conlon have long reach and punching power. And I always felt that that style was just a recipe for disaster, in particular with Michael Conlon, in particular with him. And I just never really saw it. And I think Conlon was never as confident as he made himself out to be, because he jumped between 126 and 122 in search of who was perceived as the weakest champion at the time. And I think it's only now, at the very end, he's gone to Grant Smith, who actually, I think, stylistically, I think is actually quite a good move. Grant Smith's a very underrated trainer. Very underrated. I think he's a tremendous trainer. I think he really, truly is. I mean, for me, Sonny Edwards, that was just peak Sonny Edwards with Grant Smith. Really good. He's doing great work with Dalton Smith. I think he's a marvellous coach, a really, really good one. But I think he might have got Conlon now when Conlon is probably damaged goods, because I cannot get... Listen, against Lee Wood, he looked world class for the first couple of rounds, dropped Lee Wood heavily, was obviously stopped in the 12th round. That was a wacky, insane knockout. It really was. It was an incredible fight. It really was. But since then, he got knocked out in the 5th round, I think it was, by Luis Alberto Lopez. And when he fought Jordan Gill, that's the fight I can't get out of my head. Because Jordan Gill had looked very shaky. He was stopped. He was nearly stopped by a guy. He was nearly stopped by a guy Conlon took care of in a round. I can't remember the guy's name, but I think that was the guy. I'm not sure. It could have been a different, but he was nearly stopped. And he pulled a big left hook out of the blue in round 9, knocked the guy out. And then he fought, I think it was Kiko Martinez. And he looked awful. Like, he really did look awful. He looked so easy to hurt in that fight, and I thought surely Conlon has enough left in the tank, but Conlon looked even more shot. And Jordan Gill lost his next fight to Zelfa Barrett, so I was thinking, oh my god, Conlon is even further along than I actually thought he was. So I think that this is purely comeback. I don't see it ending well. And if you're looking to do a Josh Warrington fight at some point, even European level, I look at that and think, that could be perilous for Michael Conley. Really could. In terms of the main event, Tyrone McKenna, Harlem Eubank, I expected Harlem Eubank to win this fight. I expected to stop Mckenna. Mckenna lately, he retired after the Lewis Crooker fight. He came back against Muhammad Mamidi, who he got a very contentious win over several years ago. No disputing this fight. This time he looked really bad in that fight. He was stopped in 5 rounds. He fought Dylan Moran down in Waterford at the back end of last year. That was a crazy fight. That was actually that was on Pro Box TV. And it was crazy. I mean, that whole card was hilarious because Pro Box TV, they didn't give a damn. I know Chris Algieri, I think it was Chris Algieri and Paulie Malignaggi were commentating on this on YouTube. You can go and watch it. And it was like a throwback where the commentators just knew, right, we don't care. No one's going to cancel us. No one's going to give it. We don't care. And they absolutely rinsed the fighters on that show. It was hilarious listening to. They absolutely went in on some of the fighters. But if you haven't seen Dylan Moran versus Tyrone McKenna, I recommend you go watch. It's only a 2-round fight. Both guys come out swinging for the fences. I mean swinging. And McKenna nearly knocks Moran out cold in the first round. The referee in that fight, who was the referee again? It was David John Irvine. Enough said. He's a terrible referee. And he literally gave Dylan Moran, I mean, I've never seen a referee a slow account as this. And the guy could barely stand and he let him go back to the corner. And the next knockdown in the second, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad. And again, he just stops the fight. It was bizarre. So, and that didn't give me any confidence that he could go in there and beat Harlem Eubank, who hits harder than I think his record suggests. I really do. Had him down in the 5th round. Thought after the 7th round knockout he'd get him in the 8th. He didn't. Eventually finished him off in the 10th. Yeah, look, Mckenna's 35 years old now. He's been in a lot of tough fights. Even the fights he's won. Man, he's been in some wars. Jose Felix, that Muhammad Hamidi fight. I actually thought he beat O'Hara Davis, I should say. I thought he was very unlucky not to get the nod in that fight. Remember the Jack Cattrall fight well. Dara Foley. Yeah. McKenna's had an interesting career, but I think it's well and truly time to say that's that, because I think he's getting hurt more regularly now. For me, it's a real case of just calling time on it. It really is. In terms of the boxing news, as I'm looking through X just now, I'm going through the Ring Magazine's page. We'll start with the big breaking news that happened on Tuesday, I believe it was, just before they had the press conference for Ryan, Devin and Teofimo Lopez. TKO Holdings, which is the official name of the company, who own the UFC and obviously they own the WWE. Nick Khan, president of the WWE, was going to WBC there, but no, WWE, and Dana White, obviously the president of the UFC. Turkey is now working with them. You are talking about 3 absolute powerhouses in the world of combat sport. Whether you consider WWE, I personally don't. Like, it's a form of entertainment, sports entertainment. You know, UFC and boxing, they are real in the truest sense. I know a lot of people don't like it when they say, "Oh, there's nothing fake about the wrestling." It's predetermined, you know. So it's choreographed. They're trying not to hurt one another, even though it looks like they are. They are trying not to hurt each other. That's the name of the game. That's the aim of the game, really. But I think on the surface, it's interesting. Straight away, you're seeing Turkey hold the Ring Magazine belt aloft, and you can really tell that's what they're trying to do. Now, I did a video on this already during the week, and I spoke about it, that the PBC tried that when they first started. What they did, you may remember, there was like a mass exodus of fighters from Golden Boy. Eddie Hearn was still working with fighters like James DeGale and Lee Selby, because Lee Selby was one of them. I know Carl Frampton went over to PBC as well, but he was working with McGuigan still at the time. And you had a lot of, again, even from the UK, they were going over and they were fighting on PBC shows. I watched an interview with Jamie McDonald during the week ahead of a fight announcement for GBM. And he was a fighter. Remember, he fought on a couple of PBC shows as well. So you were seeing a lot of fighters from the UK and from the US all going over to the PBC. They were trying to make it very much like UFC in regards that the PBC being a standalone promotion as opposed to being in boxing. It didn't work. And I don't know, will this necessarily work? And one thing you need to take into consideration is when you think about the branding. So if you look at WWE or UFC for argument's sake, right? You could have a WWE show in the O2 Arena in London. You could have a UFC show in the O2 Arena in London. And fans will go without knowing who's on the undercard. You know, Cody Rhodes might not be on the undercard, but it doesn't really matter because you're going for a WWE event. UFC could have, you know, fairly obscure fighters by their standards on the card. But again, people will turn up not really caring because that's the brand. Boxing is altogether different. You know, you couldn't just say Matchroom are doing a show on the O2 and not announce an undercard and then wonder, why no one turned up? Well, because you didn't announce an undercard, no one knows who's fighting. So I don't know necessarily how this model is going to work off the ground. Turkey has talked about getting young, new talent on, trying to build new talent, and straight away I looked at the guys at the press conference on Tuesday, Ryan, Devin and Tank, and even Rowley to an extent, because although he's not the best by no stretch, he is someone who can definitely sell a fight, certainly that. So for me, I'm looking and thinking, right, is this kind of the start of it now? Are we seeing them going to, you know, take their own guys, and are we going to see them actually really step away from the sanctioning bodies? Having said that, you know, those sanctioning bodies, they do carry a lot of weight. You're talking about the WBA, WBC. They go back to the 19. I think the WBA goes back. It's the oldest. The WBC goes back until the 60s or thereabouts. IBF early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And the WBO, although it's been around since probably the 1990s, it's really only the mid 2000s or early 2000s it became, but still, nevertheless, they carry a lot of weight. So I don't see how you can, essentially, for want of a better word, break away without them, so to speak. I think they'll always be. We don't need any more. People saying, "Oh, the IBO." No. The hell with all them. We don't need any of them. But I don't know. It's a strange one. It really is. I do like it. I do like the idea. I think it's a very, very interesting thing. It's bringing boxing is just over the last 2 years has just changed dramatically. It really has in terms of the people who've come into it and everything that's going on now. It's really crazy to see. I'm liking it. It's a wild ride. It really has been. But let's wait and see how this goes. Let's certainly wait and see how this goes. In terms of how the press conference went for the guys, Ryan, Devin, and Teofimo Lopez, it was kind of subdued by their standards. I really truly did go into that press conference thinking, okay, I think Conor Benn and Chris Eubank are going to have a bit of a rivalry for who had the better press conference, and there wasn't. I mean, there really truly wasn't. It was very subdued by their standards anyway. Very subdued by their standards. As we look ahead to, yes. Let's talk about, I see a quote there from Amanda Serrano. Let's talk about the announcement, because there was a couple of announcements of fights. Let's talk about the announcement of Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano 3. That's going to happen in July in New York City. Now, the atmosphere in New York City will be brilliant. Certainly, you'll have the Puerto Ricans who will come out for Amanda Serrano. You'll obviously have the big Irish base in New York, in particular on the East Coast of America, Boston, New York, kind of the Eastern Seaboard. I know a lot in Rhode Island as well, places like that, Connecticut and places like that. But I think it's a bit unfair if you think about it, because the first fight was in New York, fair enough. Second fight was in Texas, neutral ground for both respective fighters. I think with Katie Taylor being 2-0, whether you agree or disagree with that, okay, that's fair enough. But I really do think that the fight should have happened in Ireland. At the very least in a stadium, whether it was the Aviva or Croke Park or the Three Arena. Three Arena is still a very, very good place. I really do think they should have done it in Ireland. It's going to be on Netflix, so it will obviously have a massive audience, it will have a massive fan base. And given the fact that Jake Paul's involved, a lot of people tune in for that, but the fact that they fought on the undercard, co-main event before Tyson versus Paul, as horrible a fight as that was, you had so many people who know clearly, and judging by who, they didn't know nothing about boxing, but they were still compelled to tweet and retweet about this fight. I think it's going to do good numbers. It's obviously not going to do the same numbers Jake Paul and Mike Tyson did, certainly not, but it'll do very, very good numbers. Very good numbers for Netflix. Again, I would have liked to have seen this fight take place in Ireland, personally. I think we need more big boxing shows down in the Republic. We really do. I think we had a good year in 23. Last year there was a lot of independent shows in the Republic, which is good to see, but we need another big show. We really do. We need another big show. In terms of a big show that's going to be happening in the UK, Johnny Fisher versus Dave Allen 2 has recently been announced. That will take place on May the 17th in the Copper Box Arena. I will try to get to that. I live literally walking distance from the Copper Box in London, so I'll definitely try and get to that. That'll be an interesting one. The atmosphere alone, I haven't been to it. I was at the Copper Box for Hampshire Shearers when he fought Liam Williams, and the atmosphere was electric there, and it wasn't even full. I would imagine, given the fact that Romford is not a million miles away from Stratford, you can get there on the Elizabeth line and just walk to it, and it'll probably take you 20-25 minutes from Romford. It won't take you long to get there. It really won't. It's very accessible from there, so I would imagine that this will do good numbers. Johnny Fisher's a lot to prove, because really I went into that fight thinking, what does Dave Allen have left, and will he take it serious? And to be honest with you, I don't think Dave Allen took it that serious in terms of preparation. And that's a damn indictment on Johnny Fisher, because he came out swinging, he looked nervous, he couldn't put a dent in Dave Allen. And I'm of the belief that Dave Allen is a mate of Johnny Fisher. I'm not saying that he was staging or fixing this fight in any way. I'm not saying that, right? But there were moments in this fight when, if you go back and watch it, really analyse it, There was so many times after round 5 when Dave Allen was having his moments that Johnny Fisher was so open to right hands. Dave Allen was in punching range. And Dave Allen, rather than actually go and just throw a headshot, end the fight, or drop Johnny Fisher again, he would opt to go down to the body, which was bizarre. And for me, I kind of got the impression from Dave Allen that, like, okay, I'm winning this fight. I've hurt him already. He's gassed. They're mates. I don't want to damage him. I don't want to take him out with a headshot. I'll just, if I drop him to the body, I drop him to the body. He'll live to fight another day. That genuinely, that's the vibe I got. That Dave Allen was holding back a little bit from actually really going to town on Johnny Fisher. And that was a subpar Dave Allen. It definitely was. He needs to turn up for this fight. If he turns up, there's bigger paydays. Johnny Fisher, listen, Eddie Hearn will hype it and say, it's going to the cop box. You really should be dealing with, like, Fraser Clark, I don't really see as a top level prospect by no stretch. No issues with Dave Allen. None. Zilch. None. If you put him in there with a Telma, Dave Allen, he's very tough, he's very durable. So obviously, I don't expect him to, go without a fight. But again, no issues. I would imagine he would have absolutely next to no issues. So there is that. We also seen the press conference for Canelo Alvarez versus William Skull. Again, not a crazy amount to talk about with regards to that. I just can't get over how big William Skull is. He's massive. He's absolutely flipping massive in comparison to Canelo Alvarez. He is so goddamn big. He's massive. He really, truly is. Vladimir Klitschko. This was from Tom Luffler. He says, I don't want to speculate for Vladimir, but my understanding is he does want to fight for a title. Vladimir Klitschko is nearly 50 years old. He'll be 50 years old, I think, next year. Listen, again, I'm sounding like a broken clock here. I've said it before. George Foreman, oldest heavyweight champion in history, nearly 46 years old. He was an active fighter. He'd been active for years, the late 80s. This was the 94, so you're talking mid-90s. He was active for years prior. The heavyweight division didn't have... It had Michael Moore as a unified champion. It's not like, no disrespect to Michael Moore, but, he didn't beat Riddick Bowe. He didn't beat Holyfield. He didn't beat Lennox Lewis. He beat Michael Moore, a chinny light heavyweight. It's all together. No, I just can't see it. Someone like Dubois, I think he'd run through Vladimir Klitschko. And speaking of Daniel Dubois, what's the deal with him? Earlier this week, on TalkSport, Eddie Hearn was mentioning that Daniel Dubois is apparently the front runner to face Anthony Joshua, in spite of the fact that Turki Al-Sheikh has been mentioning Dubois versus Alexander Usyk 2 again. So where do we stand with this? Where do we stand with the rematch? Well, for both guys, it seems almost apparent that Dubois will have a rematch in his next fight, but against who? Against Usyk or Joshua? Personally, I would rather see him go in there with Alexander Usyk, to be honest with you. I don't... Listen, Parker, if ever someone deserves a title shot, it's Joseph Parker, in my opinion. He can fight maybe on the undercard and face the winner. Well, obviously, if it's Usyk, he won't face him because obviously Usyk has a... I can't remember the guy's name, but that kind of gimmicky fight come the end. But I would rather see Dubois versus Alexander Usyk for the simple reason that I think Dubois can be a bit more competitive this time, and I want to see how Usyk deals with someone who he doesn't seem to like. I've seen Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois. It was one-sided completely. Yeah, Dubois versus Usyk, first one was pretty much one-sided. But I think Dubois can improve. I don't think Joshua, I don't know what he can do. I don't know how he wins. I don't see how he wins that fight. He got knocked nearly out cold in 5 rounds. I can't see it. So that is that. In terms of everything else, I think that's pretty much it. You know what? I went into this video thinking 20 minutes and we're done. And I reckon I've gone way over that, which I tend to do quite a lot. I go into this review of the weeks thinking 20 minutes minimum. And boy, do they never work out that way, don't they not? They never do. I hope you enjoyed it. Smash the like button if you could. I will definitely try to get some videos out tomorrow as well. And for now, I'll leave it there. I hope you all have a great week. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. Peace.